China gives his son $1.5 billion. How would you like to have Joe Biden take over negotiations right now with China? I don't think so.
The great negotiator lays it on thick in China.
You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader.
And the Trump family moves in for a potential payday.
There's rampant corruption, and it sucks, and it shouldn't happen, and it's disgusting.
Tonight, the big winners of Trump's trip to China and new reporting that Trump's IRS lawsuit could turn into a slush fund for Trump's allies. Plus, today's fascinating victory for reproductive rights at the Supreme Court. All that and the new reporting on Kash Patel's VIP snorkeling adventure in Pearl Harbor.
I'm the first one in. I'm the last one out. I've never been intoxicated on the job.
And All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Is there a single person on earth who really believes that Donald Trump is in China to represent the public interest, to help ordinary Americans, put America in the best possible position? It's what state visits like these are supposed to be about. But with Trump, it feels like a lot of money-grubbing private interest. Let's just start with who he's traveling with, his retinue, some of the richest and most powerful people on earth. Elon Musk, Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Tim Cook of Apple, Dina Powell of Meta, about a dozen others from companies like BlackRock and Boeing. What do you think their agenda is during this trip? Do you think they're focused on what's best for, like, the American middle class, the working class? Or are they focused on what's best for them, for their shareholders and their boards? Well, we know the answer. Reuters is reporting that, quote, a critical precondition for companies to join the trip was having a tangible ask that promised a concrete outcome or a handshake deal during or after the summit. A precondition for these CEOs to attend the trip was to have some kind of scheme cooked up to make some more cash. Here's another one for you. The Trump family would have you believe the president's adult son, Eric, the guy who runs the Trump Organization and just flew to China with his dad's entourage of oligarchs, is on the trip solely to support his dad.
This is probably the best of it, what you're seeing right here. Air Force One flying to the other side of the world, just to be an observer, to be a fly on the wall, and to keep your father company. I have no other role in this trip.
Oh, dad needs company, fly on the wall. Oh, look, little me here, just watching this all happen. You really believe that? Eric Trump, who runs a family business, just there to keep his dad company, the one who was like on the board of some drone company, he's got a Pentagon contract and also runs some phone company that sells golden Trump phones that never ship. That guy, when even the first lady apparently couldn't be bothered to go. I mean, Donald Trump knows the score here. We all do, right? Once upon a time, Donald Trump has very strong feelings about a son traveling with his father on an official state visit to China.
Hunter, I just want to tell you, I couldn't be happier for you and your family. And I know you don't know anything about energy, and I know it's an energy company, but I think they made a great deal, Hunter. And then they fly to China. And I'm dealing with people right now, they're tough as hell, those Chinese negotiators. And Hunter, who's not too smart, Hunter. He goes in, he has a meeting, he walks out in his fund with $1.5 billion, with a B, $1.5 billion.
Now, Trump sure thought it was a problem when Hunter Biden flew on Air Force One. With Eric, of course, it's fine, right? By the way, is it me or did Donald Trump seem like 20 years younger in that clip? My God. And again, it's only a scandal when it's sort of different than the background, right? When you can, like, you know, make it out. I mean, that was the thing about the whole Hunter Biden stuff, right? And Joe Biden, it's like that was this one thing they could point to. But that's not how Trump operates, right? This is just every day. Every day there's some new example of how the Trump family is enriching itself. Take this situation. This is wild. And maybe you saw this, maybe you didn't. With the Palm Beach airport, do you see this? Okay, there's a Palm Beach airport. The state of Florida has now sycophantically renamed it the President Donald J. Trump International Airport. Normally, this would just be a symbolic tribute. It's not for the Trumps. Get this, as the Guardian reports, quote, analysts predict the president is likely to net millions from the unorthodox legal agreement between Palm Beach County and DTTM Operations, LLC, his Delaware-based company that oversees licensing, marketing, and intellectual property. Under the leadership of Donald Trump Jr., the company, part of the wider Trump organization, has assumed numerous rights and advantages the analysts say are unusual for a contract of this nature, irrespective that it prohibits direct financial compensation from goods sold at the airport. So basically what this is the Trump family business gets to total control over the vendors who hawk merch to tourists and retain the right to make money from any licensing of the airport's name. Again, one of those things like the no-bid contract for $13 million of the pool refinishing that just would be like dominating the news for a week. But again, just also used to headlines like that. It's baked in. It's baked in. We know it. Trump and the family and the people around him will take every single opportunity to enrich themselves, regardless of the optics. The corruption has become so commonplace, it's not news. Here's another example. Again, these are just from today. I'm just doing today's news. So back in 2024, the Biden DOJ indicted India's richest man, Gautam Adani, for corruption and fraud. Adani then hired, wait for it, ready? One of Trump's personal lawyers as his representation. Now, I could stop there and be like, guess how this ends up, ladies and gentlemen? Well, as the New York Times reports, Trump's lawyer got Adani a meeting with the DOJ last month where he made the government an offer. He went through the case and all the reasons they shouldn't prosecute and why they had a strong defense. But then there was a slide that said if they dropped the case, Adani would invest $10 billion in the U.S. economy and create 15,000 jobs. First of all, do we think that's really going to happen? But also, what the hell, dude? That has nothing to do with a criminal case. Well, today, the Times reported that, lo and behold, the DOJ will drop the charges. Sure, it feels like they proffered a bribe. I mean, again, maybe not to Trump's pockets directly, but it gives him achievement to tout, right? That's the whole point. Which brings us today, and again, we are just doing today's news as the president of China, just today's news, okay? That brings us to the pièce de résistance, what I like to think of as the Sistine Chapel of Trump corruption, what you might call the Great Heist. Yes, it's the story we covered last night, in which Donald Trump is trying to shake down his own government, the one that he controls, for 10 billion with a B Donald Trump dollars. Okay? He's suing the IRS for his tax returns leaking, in which, by the way, is a very legally defective suit, just parentheses. And he wants a settlement. And he's the one overseeing whether he's going to get a settlement. It's his government, right? Well, today, as he's off in China making deals for God knows who, we have more reporting about how this heist might shake out. According to a new report in the ABC News, which MS Now has not independently confirmed, Trump has a broad outline of what he wants for his settlement. Trump will drop his lawsuit, get this, ready, in exchange for an opaque, secretive, unaccountable $1.7 billion slush fund of your tax dollars, okay? Deposited in, specifically, wait for it, for so-called victims who claim they were unfairly targeted by the Biden DOJ. I'm going to quote here from ABC's reporting. While the exact terms of the settlement are still being finalized, sources have described the proposed compensation fund as a hybrid between a victim compensation fund similar to the civil claims process that followed the 2020 Deepwater Horizon oil spill and a truth and reconciliation style commission. The settlement terms are expected to prohibit Trump from directly receiving payments related to those three legal claims. However, entities associated with Trump are not explicitly barred from filing additional claims, sources said. Under the terms of the potential settlement agreement, President Trump would have the authority to remove members of the commission running the fund without cause. The commission would be under no obligation to disclose its procedures or decision-making process for awarding more than $1 billion, the sources said. Think of this. $1.7 billion of our money, of public money, money that could go to Medicaid or to food stamps or to repairing roads or to helping farmers or whatever. $1.7 billion that Trump now controls with zero oversight of your money to dole out to who? How? Maybe he'll give it to the guys who beat the cops half to death on January 6th, the ones that were like trying to crush him in the door until he died and then he was rescued. Or maybe they'll give it to the dude with the Auschwitz t-shirt or the guy with the Confederate flag. Or maybe he'll dole out millions to the men convicted of seditious conspiracy for an attempt armed insurrection against our democracy. You believe the guy who reportedly wants that deal has your best interest at heart? Congressman Jamie Raskin is a Democrat of Maryland. He serves as ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, and he joins me now. Okay, I don't know where to start with this. Again, you're the constitutional law professor and you're the lawyer and I'm not. I'm married to a constitutional law professor and a very good lawyer. Can this possibly be legal? I want to say that it's not legal, but can this possibly be legal?
Well, it's an outrageous abuse of the judgment fund that the Department of Justice has had since the 1960s to settle actually valid legal causes of action, claims brought against the government. And for many decades now, Congress has trusted the Department of Justice to administer this fund fairly. But of course, we're living in Trump land, and so it's just one more political slush fund for them. Trump's utterly bogus, spurious $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS is not being settled. That's just an excuse for them to go ahead and create this fund. If he went to court with that cause of action against the IRS, his lawyers would be sanctioned like so many of them. It's just utterly ridiculous. It is ludicrous. But they want to use it as the pretext to set up this $1.7 billion slush fund. Congress has got to rein in the administration, and we've got to restore control over the appropriations of the government, because the Department of Justice, if you do the math on this, Chris, the first thing I did was I divided 1.7 billion by 1,600, which is the number of pardoned insurrectionists and rioters there were, and you get just over $1 million. Each one of them could be given $1 million, and then they would have, tens of millions left over for other purposes. But he's basically replenishing the private militia that he pardoned from January 6th, just in time for the 2026 elections.
Again, you just said it. That was also my thought, was like, man, this has some real warlord vibes to it. Like, you're going to plunder the state for billions of dollars in cash that you're going to hand out to the people that violently attempted to overthrow the government last time on your behalf, including people convicted of sedition. Again, I don't know who he's going to give it out to, but that appears, again, from the reporting, this appears to be the plan. Those are the people he pardoned, right? He's set all the precedents here. Look, that is dark stuff.
Yes, it's terrifying to contemplate what might be going through his mind right now. But let's get back to the rule of law for a second. In America, if you've got a claim against the government because the government, had a truck going down the highway and crushed your car, or there was medical malpractice by an army doctor, you bring a lawsuit or you file a claim. And the government almost never settles the claims, and you've got to go to court in order to do it. But you've got to make a proof that you actually were injured and there were actual damages. This has nothing to do with that. He wants to set up a fund that is completely under the control of his sycophants and cronies, and he can dismiss them at any time if they're not doing exactly what he wants. And he can literally direct them to give money to this or that person based on personal favor or whatever reason he wants. There's no rule of law or rhyme or reason to any of it. It is just a slush fund, and it has got to be stopped. And I call on all of the Republican members of Congress to please stand up for the rule of law once and for all at last. You cannot allow this to go on.
If you take a step back, right, there's a kind of broader sense in which, if you think about this as like a house that's been vandalized or messed with, right? Like, we're at the point now where this is not surface damage to the structure. It's not like drywall and a paint job. This is like structural damage being committed against the constitutional order. Profound structural damage that needs some sort of structural response. Like, you got to go in there with an architect and an engineer. And if Democrats win a majority in Congress, what that first step is, if down the road they get all branches of government, are you thinking that way? Are Democrats thinking that way?
Well, absolutely, because what we're facing here is that corruption is not an occasional weekend excursion for them. Corruption is all they do. It's like watching The Sopranos and waking up and what is the scam of the day? What is the ripoff and the caper we're going to do today? They don't have a plan to get health care to the American people or lower inflation on day one or bring down the price of groceries or housing. No, they've got plans to get themselves rich. So this is corruption versus democracy. To stand up for constitutional democracy is to stand up against all of these schemes of private self-enrichment and corruption, which is all that they are doing. And this is why I am saying to the Republicans, you have a unified Democratic caucus against this prostitution of the U.S. government and this plunder of the taxpayers. We need just a handful of you to stand up for your country.
Since the scope of this is so enormous and $1.7 million and also so ridiculous because every day you're chasing down a new one, I do have to get your, as someone who's on the Judiciary Committee, your response to just another sort of small example of this, which is emails show that FBI Director Kash Patel's Hawaii trip included a VIP snorkel at the Pearl Harbor Memorial. VIP snorkel around the USS Arizona, coordinated by the military. We should note snorkeling is normally not allowed around the memorial site where 900 sailors and Marines died when it sank December 7, 1941. But that seems believable to me, but also sort of par for the course.
Well, you know, it's lawlessness up and down. These are people who don't respect the major principles of the Constitution, like the Foreign Emoluments Clause, the Domestic Emoluments Clause, and of course they're not going to respect some, you know, mere regulations against snorkeling if that's what they intend to do, to go out and have a party and snorkel and drink and whatever else they do. They never have the public interest in mind. They are never conscious of what the law is, and they are flagrantly violating the Constitution and exploiting the American people and our resources. And it's a scandal. So we are in the fight of our lives every single day between now and the election in November. We've got to defend the election against every form of artifice, every scheme to corrupt it and steal it. And then we've got to keep going because we're looking at a presidential election and we've got to defend democracy all the way through. But people need to get ready for this because I know everybody has been in the struggle for a long time, but you got to stick with it because this is not the struggle for 1 year or one election cycle. We need to take democracy back from these people. They are criminals, they are plunderers, they are liars, thieves, and hypocrites all the way.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, thanks for your time tonight.
You bet.
Coming up, Trump's open corruption hits new heights. Congressman Ro Khanna on the president's other travel companions. Again, keep your eyes on this. That's next. Donald Trump seems very eager for the rich CEOs he's traveling to China with to make some big deals while they're abroad. And it turns out there might be a reason for that. According to this new financial disclosure today from Trump, we learned that in the first 3 months of this year, Trump entities bought millions of dollars of shares for a bunch of companies whose CEOs just so happen to be on the trip. For instance, one of those companies happens to be Boeing. You wouldn't know it. Trump announced today on Fox News that China has agreed to purchase 200 jets from Boeing. So good for Boeing. Good for him. White House says Trump's assets are in a trust his kids control. Think about that for a second. That's not really an arm's length kind of thing, right? Is it okay for the President of the United States to be buying and selling stock in companies he's actively working in his official capacity to boost? Is it okay he stands to profit from that? Congressman Ro Khanna is a Democrat of California, serves as ranking member of the Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the U.S. and China, and he joins me now. Let me just start on that because there has been so much attention on members of Congress trading stocks. And in this case, there's like this trust the kids control, his adult children, who's like one of whom's on the plane. Obviously, that's like a fiction. You can just tell them to trade stocks, however. And when I saw the disclosure today, I was like, oh, right, the president, who has way more control and way more inside knowledge about what might be happening, he can trade stocks based on that.
Well, obviously, we need to ban stock trading in Congress, but 100-fold of what's going on is the corruption in the White House and the fact that Donald Trump thinks that it's okay for his kids to be controlling stocks while he's making deals is just blatant corruption. No president in modern times has done that. They always, when they get there, put their money in an independent managed trust, a blind trust, where it's some institution having the assets. And Trump just flouted that as he's flouted a lot of other laws.
Here's the thing so striking to me about the optics of this trip so far, and I think it's a little like the Iran war, right? If you were to sort of ask someone who doesn't even pay a lot of attention to politics of like the sort of Trump brand or what does he stand for, one of the things was like no new wars in the Middle East, right? The other big thing was like the 20 to 30 years of bipartisan consensus that like vis-a-vis the U.S.-China relationship, what's good for the CEOs is good for Americans, that like Donald Trump is against all that, right? Like he's the sledgehammer that's going to, and I'm like watching in the same way watching the Iran war. It's like, wait a second, I guess we're doing this all over again. We're doing the like, what do the CEOs want? And that's what's going to be good for America.
Chris, you nailed it. I mean, you actually took Donald Trump seriously. Like the two things that he campaigned on since 2016 is we shouldn't have these foreign wars. I'm going to be the guy who's not going to get into militarism. And then he said, look, they sold you out. Wall Street sold you out. Silicon Valley tech billionaires sold you out. They sold you out to China. They let China into the World Trade Organization. There was the China shock. It decimated Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan. I'm going to be the guy who actually stands up to China, rebalances the economy. And then he asks the very global elite he railed against to come with him to beg China to put $1 trillion into America and have factories that are going to undercut American labor here. It's worse than even offshoring jobs, and to cut more deals to offshore. I mean, you can't write it. It's so tragic. It's like my heart bleeds for the American worker who just got duped by this guy.
Do you think, I mean, one thing I think that people haven't realized below the surface, again, I think this like idea of hawkishness is a little stupid in many ways. The U.S.-China relationship is complicated and nuanced and really complex, like lots of cross pressures. But at the most basic level, the Biden administration was pretty tough on China, pretty restrictive, pretty intense on investing in American manufacturing, like didn't let a bunch of the NVIDIA chips go over there. Trump has been way, way, way more conciliatory on all that stuff. Or am I getting it wrong?
He has. Well, first of all, there was a reason manufacturing was up under Joe Biden. Jobs, I mean, it's not making it up. It's like data. And manufacturing is down under Donald Trump, 80,000 jobs down. He has had no investment in American industry. He's had no sense of actually holding China accountable on dumping and investigations. I mean, let me give you one concrete example, because I was on this trip, Heartland tour. There's a Chinese company, Fuyao, which is a glass manufacturer that has imported a lot of labor violations from overseas and is undercutting American manufacturing in Pennsylvania. And Biden was investigating them. Trump stopped the investigation. So it is pure rhetoric with him and no policy.
That's a really great point. What should come out of this? Like, this is one of those areas where I genuinely feel it's pretty complex. There's a lot of nuance to it. I don't think a Cold War with China is a particularly good idea for either country. I also think like the relationship we had with them was pretty dysfunctional vis-a-vis the like China shock. What do you hear on this tour? What do you think it should look like?
Look, I think it should be an affirmation of the one China policy, saying the future of Taiwan should be determined by Taiwan and China without military coercion. And that's double deterrence. Deter Taiwan from declaring independence, deter China from having coercion. So I agree with you. We don't want a Cold War. We don't want total decoupling. But what we want is rebalancing. We don't want them to be subsidizing all their industry. If they want to invest in the United States, they should learn to respect labor law, and it shouldn't undercut our union jobs. And we should have investment in critical industries, in steel, in batteries, in new technology here in the United States, so that we don't have these massive trade deficits. All of that Biden was doing. And Trump basically has undermined that in this trip. And he is really betraying the farmers and manufacturers who he campaigned saying that he was going to stand up for them.
You know, you mentioned the farmers. It occurred to me today, I was talking about the Iran analogy, that like soybean purchases is the Chinese Strait of Hormuz. In both Trump 1 and Trump 2, they figured out very quickly that American farmers are very dependent on export sales of soybeans to China. And that if you turn that off in the same way that you like turn Strait of Hormuz off, you immediately create very politically salient pain in the U.S. And we've seen it happen now twice, and it's been a pretty effective means of the Chinese government essentially like kind of getting Trump to back down and show his belly.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, soybean sales are down, and the other leverage they had is they stopped sending rare earths and critical minerals.
Right.
And so what happened is Trump came in, he had a sledgehammer approach. He spiked tariffs. Then he basically got spooked because he realized, well, China can just stop buying soybeans, stop selling us rare earths. And so now he's like just capitulating. And it actually shows that some level of expertise and knowledge actually matters. Like, you know, it's when you're running the world's greatest economy and superpower, it matters that you know what you're doing and don't just engage in puffery. And now people are facing the consequences of someone who doesn't know what he's doing on the nuances of the relationship.
All right, Congressman Ro Khanna, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Still ahead, Democrats call for Trump's Commerce Secretary to resign. Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari on the latest Epstein cover-up attempt and developments on the Lutnick front. That's next. Late yesterday, we got a first look at the 96-page transcript of Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's testimony to the House Oversight Committee behind closed doors last week. That was where Lutnick tried to clean up all the inconsistencies, one might even say outright lies, depending on how you interpret it, surrounding his relationship with the late child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. That transcript appears to support the sentiments of Democrats who questioned Lutnick, who said he still wasn't being honest. Well, today, all 21 Democrats on the House Oversight Committee signed a letter demanding Lutnick's resignation. Quote, "The facts are clear. You lied to the American people and attempted to conceal your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in your public statements. Your lack of candor demonstrates you are unfit to perform the duties required of you as Secretary of Commerce." Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari of Arizona is one of the Oversight Democrats who attended the hearing and signed that letter, and she joins me now. I mean, obviously, I think Democrats are going to be skeptical of any Trump cabinet member. And he did seem to be not the most forthcoming. Why call for his resignation?
I think of all of the people that we have conducted interviews with so far throughout the Epstein investigation, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary of the United States of America, was the most blatantly deceptive, the most obviously covering up for, you know, the lies that he has already told to the American people. And I think we're all just so sick and tired of how disgustingly corrupt the Trump administration is, and the fact that people in my district, the vast majority of them, and you know, the majority of Americans across this country are just so sick of this corruption as they take away people's health care. And then Howard Lutnick just sits in front of us behind closed doors without being on video and just lies over and over and over again. I read back parts of the transcript and I was just disgusted all over again myself.
I have not read the entire transcript, but I was going through a bunch of it today, and he is very, I'll say, like squirrely and evasive. If that's a fair or charitable read, was that how it felt in the room?
Yes, and that's why, you know, I actually wasn't that concerned for this one, that it wasn't on video compared to some of the others, because it's so clear even when you read the back and forth that he's lying and that he's uncomfortable. And it's just clear from the responses. I mean, whether you look at our dialogue where I asked him about whether or not in the year 2012, when he went to Epstein's Island, whether he had heard about the 2008 Alex Acosta sweetheart plea deal and the many accusations and the charges against Epstein. He said no, even though this was his next door neighbor and they ran in the same circles. Whether you look at other members' exchanges with him and you read them and you know how he takes back the fact that he had claimed in October of 2025 that he believed that Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed people. And he's taken that back. And I think that's one of the pieces that we need to look at most closely. And I think the interview with Lutnick, as well as our trip earlier this week to West Palm Beach and the hearing that Oversight Democrats had with survivors of these heinous crimes, really has demonstrated to me that we will have to open much of this back up, that we have to bring these individuals back when we take the majority in Congress. And there have to be real consequences for these lies, because these are crimes. I mean, whether you're under oath or not under oath, lying to Congress is a lie. And someone like Howard Lutnick has clearly done so over and over and over again.
I want to just stay on that one point that you made, because I was looking at the transcript today, that point where you ask, okay, in 2012, you know, were you aware? And he says no. Now, at this time, this is a guy who's like sort of notorious and has a huge reputation and has moved next door and is a billionaire and like people know, like they travel in similar circles. It's on the internet. Like that one is pretty tough and implausible, particularly when paired with the story that he told at length about his wife and him going over there, and Epstein saying an incredibly creepy thing about the massage room he keeps in his house. That, like, all combined, his testimony before your committee is that, like, no, never put the name into Google, like, knew nothing about it, right? That's what he's saying.
Yeah, that part was really heated in the moment because I was so shocked that he said that. I mean, I think my expectation for some of these things, it's like when you've been caught so red-handed or you've made a mistake in your life. Everybody does make mistakes, and maybe you made a bad judgment call. Just say that. I think it's really bizarre and raises so many more questions that he tries to claim that he didn't know. And again, I've said this many times, and I said it to him, I was like, I was a child then, and I heard about it. It was a kind of a tabloid thing. It was all over the news. I mean, everyone knew about this. So to say that you didn't know, you are so clearly lying. And again, this is now, I just feel like he's a pathological liar. He's digging himself deeper into a hole. I don't think he has any morals whatsoever, and I think he should be fired immediately for that.
On the sort of original sin here, which is that Acosta deal, right? I mean, the idea of someone getting a sweetheart deal that are connected. I have to ask about this news, and I'm not sure you saw it today. You're on the Oversight Committee, but about a billionaire indicted in the final days of the Biden administration, Indian billionaire Adani, who hired Trump's personal lawyer, made a presentation where they said why they think they have a case. It's Robert Jufer Jr., and then said we're going to, invest money in the U.S. and hire a bunch of people, $10 billion investment, and then has the case dismissed, which is a different shade than the sort of original sin that happened with Alex Acosta. But there's a sort of thematic connection here about like who gets justice and who doesn't.
Yeah, and let's talk about who's gotten justice and who hasn't. In West Palm Beach, we heard from girls, from women who were girls at the time, one of whom had never spoken like this publicly before, because the reason she was even there was because Pam Bondi failed to redact her name. And so when she botched the Epstein files release, this woman's entire life was exposed. Rosa, she had been trafficked through international modeling agencies. And these women still have not gotten justice because Alex Acosta did this insane sweetheart plea deal back in 2008 where they called these girls child prostitutes. And the women even said it themselves. They're like, is that even a thing? There's no such thing as a child prostitute. Right. And it's just so egregious that, again, Alex Acosta came before our committee and acted like that was a normal thing that he did. And there was nothing weird about that when it's all clearly a cover up. And then you have people, who have committed vast crimes who are going to likely get pardons from this administration because of money and because of billions of dollars in corruption. And that is just the theme of this administration, is egregious and vast, endless corruption.
Congresswoman Yasmin Ansari, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Since returning to the White House, abortion has been, I think it's fair to say, like the one issue that Donald Trump has tried to keep as far away from headlines, to draw as little attention to as humanly possible. There are a lot of people, though, who want to keep cracking down on abortion, particularly by targeting medications that are now used for more than 60% of the time. Those people include right-wing state attorneys general, like the one in Louisiana, where abortion is almost totally banned. Well, last fall, that state challenged the FDA's decision to make abortion medication available by mail. Today, the Supreme Court issued a stay on a ruling by the lower Fifth Circuit that would have basically blocked telehealth access to mifepristone. It's one of the two pills used in most medication abortions. The court's move today means mifepristone still available by mail for now. But again, there is a widespread effort across multiple fronts in Congress, at the regulatory level, in the courts, to end medical abortion, to go after states where doctors are mailing the pills to other states where abortion is banned. And in this midterm election year, some conservatives on the Supreme Court may want to deflect attention from this, sort of nothing to see here. But one of the things I saw today, and you see now, is the clock is ticking on their ability to keep doing that. Philip Bump's a senior data editor and columnist for CT Insider. Michelle Goodwin, professor of constitutional law and global health policy at Georgetown Law School, author of the book Policing the Womb, and they join me now. Michelle, let me just start with you. So basically you have, there's been multiple attempts, right, through the courts to stop the FDA from allowing doctors to prescribe this through telemedicine to mail this medication. The Fifth Circuit, very conservative court, sided with the Louisiana AG who's trying to stop that. And then the Supreme Court today stayed that, pending appeal, meaning people get to still have the medication. But there were some angry dissents by Alito. What do you make of what the court did today?
Well, it's important what the court did today, but you're absolutely right that the court has become deeply politicized. It's a kind of framing that even 10 years ago people would be very hesitant with naming, but it's incredibly clear with the Supreme Court. You showed an image of the order from today. About a paragraph is devoted to staying the case. It's the other 8 pages that are devoted to Justice Thomas and Justice Alito showing their discontent with the majority of the court. And I think you're absolutely right that this has become so politicized that members of the court may very well be concerned about midterm elections. And let's be clear, that is a bridge that is way too far for the Supreme Court, but it is hard to deny, as so many Americans show discontent with the Supreme Court, show their dismay with the Supreme Court, and their lack of trust in the Supreme Court, that now it's hard to avoid the allegations that the court has become politically partisan and its own legislative branch of government.
What's interesting to me, Michelle and Philip, is that the same dynamic evident in the order today, right? Which is that a majority of the court says, let's stay it. And then Justice and Thomas and Alito are furious. In fact, Alito says, what is at stake is the perpetration of a scheme to undermine our decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. And what he means by that is letting women have abortions, right? Like, putatively, Dobbs was about the Constitution. But what he's like pissed off about evidently is like, we don't want women to keep having access to abortions. And that dynamic is the same dynamic inside the Trump administration at the FDA. Right. It's the same dynamic in Congress. There is a powerful force in the Republican Party who wants to crack down, who so far has largely been held at bay, but you wonder how long that's going to last.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we're seeing now, and this is an issue that continues to be the case, that most Americans support the access to abortion. I think it's safe to say that one of the reasons that we're seeing, for example, Donald Trump ousting the head of the FDA is that this was a person who was targeted by the pro-life community for not being hardcore enough on abortion.
Yep.
On May 6th, the Wall Street Journal says, hey, this is why this is happening. On May 8th, Donald Trump starts, there rumors emerge that the FDA commissioner is going to be gone. One of the things that I think is fascinating is that it's also happening right now that Donald Trump is responsive to that community because he has always seen the pro-life community as a political asset and not as a moral issue or not as an issue that he is central on, right, that is core to his belief system. He understands the midterms are coming. He sees a thing that this is a constituency of his that is going sideways, and he takes steps to address that.
Right. The FDA director was ousted. He was sort of in the middle of a few different controversies that anti-abortion groups hated the fact the FDA has not changed its regulation on telemedicine. There's also he was also not pro-flavored vape enough, which is what would have been. Apparently, the president really likes flavored vapes. But it's also the case, Michelle, that like, there have now been multiple attempts at this. It's one of these things where whether the court is playing politics or not, it's knocking at the door of bringing this back, right? I mean, the court now has to deal with this Fifth Circuit ruling, don't they?
Well, they do, but they don't have to deal with it right now. And it's deeply concerning. I always like to level set. Let's remember that when Dobbs came, the Supreme Court was overturning a decision that was 7-2, Roe v. Wade, and 5 of those 7 justices were Republican appointed. What the Supreme Court is doing now, and what Justice Alito has claimed, is that the Supreme Court is acting recklessly and disregarding what happened in Dobbs. But that's exactly what he did with regard to Roe. It is highly unusual. In fact, it had never happened that the Supreme Court overturned a right, and certainly not one in which there had been a reliance interest, which means that there were people actually relying on what the Supreme Court had actually decided in Roe v. Wade. So it's a bit ironic. It's like the pot calling the kettle black, or any of those ways in which you see a bit of a hypocrisy, which is exactly what you see from Justice Alito. But it's also worth noting where Justice Thomas has landed on on this. He's been concerned and mentioned it in Dobbs that all of what we've seen basically of the last 50 years of substantive due process rights, he says, put them on the table, put them on the chopping block. All of those with the exception of interracial marriage, which affects his life, but anything else that we've seen with regard to gay marriage, contraceptive access, all of that. So we should be concerned not just about what's happening here with abortion, but we should also be concerned about contraception and any of the other areas in which Americans have said we want to live in that kind of democracy. All of that is a perfect storm coming from the Supreme Court potentially.
And Thomas, in his dissent today, talks about the possible criminal prosecution of these doctors. You've got to sort of, we talked about Iran. Here's the polling on abortion, just, legal 60%, illegal 38%. Iran's a sort of similar dynamic, right? It's like not very popular at all. People hate it. It sort of goes back on one of his core promises. There's a small group of super motivated and powerful people in the Republican coalition who want to go with the war with Iran. Mm-hmm. Exact same dynamics here. We showed the polling. It screwed the Republicans in the year of Dobbs in 2022 in the midterms. Exactly. And yet there's a small group of people who pretty close to him who really want their version of an Iran war, which is mass criminalization of abortion.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, I was going to mention 2022. People forget that was a better than expected year for Democrats, primarily because of the Dobbs decision. I do think that it's important to remember the distinction here, which is that there is a core moral belief that some people have that leads them to this decision. Again, though, that's not how Donald Trump has ever viewed this. It's not how he's ever talked about it. And in 2016, he never betrayed any understanding of the nuance of the issue. And so now he's sort of here with his hands tied.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, who does he listen to, though, as we come down the stretch? Because I think you can go either way, right? Like, keep this far away, or my base is getting restless. I got to give him something. That's Philip Bump, Michelle Goodwin, thank you both. Stay tuned in just a few minutes. Jen Psaki will be speaking with former FBI Director James Comey.